Hello and welcome to episode 30 of What Makes This Song Special. Every week I take a song, I talk about what makes it special to me, what does it remind me of in my life, what story or event does it take me back to. You can leave a comment and let me know why it's special to you, if it is. We then talk about the band or artist, and then we talk a little bit about the singer, and then I follow up with a part 2, which I'll leave a link for at the end, where I'll do my own version of the song, my own take on it. So this week's song is going to be John Martyn, Don't Want to Know. I always call it evil because that's the word that always comes up in the chorus, but it's called Don't Want to Know. And I'll tell you why it's special to me. So in 2005, round about 2005, I was working full-time as a chef in my attempt to sort of pay the bills and try and do something that wasn't as strange an income or as sort of bitty an income as being a musician was. I'd sort of taken on the role as a head chef in a restaurant in the south side of Glasgow, and I'd let music take a back seat for a while. I'd just become fed up, jaded with all the effort that goes into trying to be a famous musician or being a famous band. It was getting to me, and I was in a sort of insecure place. And even when opportunities did arise for me as a singer, my anxiety and some mental health issues would sort of push me to always turn them down. And I needed a break from music just for a few months or a year, just to work out what I was doing, what I was going to do with my life. I was just kind of fed up. Not fed up with music, but just fed up with the world of trying to be a singer-songwriter, because you don't get paid anything, and it's a lot of work for very little in return a lot of the time, until of course maybe you make it, which I never. But I just needed a break. So friends and family and my own sense of unfulfillment at being a chef, which wasn't really my dream job, always ended up making me take the odd gig or keep writing songs. And there's more about this time period for another episode and another song. But I remember I met this guy called John Hollis, became a friend at the time, and he really loved music. He wasn't a musician himself, but he loved listening to bands, and he knew lots of musicians in Glasgow, and he was the type of friend who would always try and find opportunities for you, to sort of showcase you, which I was always very appreciative of. Even if at the time I really wasn't in a great frame of mind to be playing music. I just felt out of practice, and like, don't get me wrong, I was still playing my piano and my guitar most days. I was writing songs, I was messing about, singing songs in the house, but I wasn't gigging and I wasn't polished. So every time John said, "Oh, I've got a wee gig for you, or a slot for you to go and play a couple of songs somewhere," I was always appreciative, but it was always met with that kind of feeling in the pit of my stomach that I was like, "Oh, I don't really want to do this," and I just felt under rehearsed every time and underprepared. I was working a lot of hours as a chef, and there was just never time to rehearse or prepare a set. And I never really felt like I was giving the crowd or anybody who came to see me at that point the best version of me for that year or so, because it was just, yeah, it was just a sort of limbo year where I obviously later found out I just couldn't stay away from music and had to find a way of making it a full-time job. But for a little while it was something I just couldn't be bothered chasing anymore. Anyway, one afternoon John phones me and he says, "I've got a really cool gig for you. It's this Sunday. I've got tickets to see this band." It was at Maryhill Community Arts Centre Hall or something like that. It's in Maryhill in the West End of Glasgow. And he said, "I've got this, I'm going to see this band, and they've agreed to let you go up and sing 2 songs with them." And I thought, oh God, like, okay, thanks, John, but what am I going to sing? I haven't met these guys. How is it going to be? And I think that's all the information I got from, apart from that they would just join in with anything I played. He was like, "The guys are brilliant, they're really good, so whatever you want to play, they'll play along, and if they can't play along, you can just play it acoustically." So I thought, right, okay. So it was arranged that they had a piano and everything there, or a keyboard, and I could just go up and sing. I didn't have to bring anything, and I thought, okay, that's that's a plus, because any gigging musician out there knows that the most tedious and frustrating thing about playing gigs is always carrying everything in and setting all your stuff up and everything. So I thought, well, I'll go along, watch. I'm just going to jump up for 2 songs. Try not to get too nervous about it. I prepared one of my own songs, a song called My Siren, which is on my first album, and a cover of Van Morrison's Moondance, classic sort of 70s, I think it's 70s, pretty sure it's 70s, Van Morrison track. And we get there on the Sunday afternoon. It turns out that the band that I'm playing with are basically all these old session players, these older guys who have played as session players for years, touring with John Martyn, amongst others. Some of them have played with Phil Collins. I think the bass player had played with Eric Clapton, and some other big names that I can't remember now, but they mentioned all these different folk they'd played with, and I thought, oh my God, I'm out of my depth here. And they were basically John Martyn's touring band, without John Martyn. And they were incredible. I mean, these guys were like total pros. They were just amazing, total professionals. They could make any sound come out of their instruments. They made the music flow out of their instruments in a way that just, in a level that only experience can take you to, like a completely different level of musicianship that I don't think you can acquire without time and live performances for decades. These guys they've just got something that you can't buy. You can get really good, practicing on your own. I know lots of guys who, I mentioned my mate Davey a few weeks ago, and I think they Still Got the Blues episode, and Davey was an absolutely phenomenal guitar player. He just sort of locked himself in his bedroom when he was a teenager, and played for sort of 7 or 8 hours a day. That makes you really good. Obviously, it makes you really good at your instrument. However, I think you can get so good like that, and then there's a different level that you go to when you've played live for years with lots of different musicians. There's an experience. There's a psychic ability to know what other players are going to do before they do them, and you sort of adjust accordingly. And I feel like I've been doing that for a long time myself now, and I kind of, not that I'm saying I'm as good as these guys, but from playing live every single week in, week out, with different musicians, and you do get to a point where you can just jump on stage with folk and you all kind of know where the music, it's a strange phenomenon. I don't know how to describe it, but you know what everybody's going to do, and you adjust accordingly. And so anyway, so I go up on stage with these guys and I play my 2 songs, and these guys just play along as if we've practiced them a million times. They're playing these amazing parts, and I'm thinking, my God, I need to keep that idea for the guitar and when I record this. And when it was over, they asked me to stay on stage and play the keyboard for another song. So there's this like Fender Rhodes. I'd always wanted to play a Fender Rhodes, and there was a Fender Rhodes on stage. And I'll use a Fender Rhodes sample for the part 2, so you know what a Fender Rhodes sounds like. But it's like a kind of electric piano that just a really iconic 70s sound. It's just amazing. Anyway, I say 70s, well, maybe late 60s as well. I don't know when the Fender Rhodes came out, probably the 60s, but there's a kind of late 60s, early 70s sound that is sort of synonymous with like the Doors. If you think of Riders in the Storm, that sound that's in there. And anyway, this Fender Rhodes is lying there, and they were like, you can stay up and just jam a couple of songs with us. And I thought, God, a bit of fear hit me in the belly, and I'm like, God, could please be a song that I've at least heard before. And I wasn't the biggest John Martyn fan in the world at that point. I think I'd heard the Solitaire album, which is of course an absolute masterpiece. I hadn't really heard a lot of his stuff, but thankfully they played Evil again. I call it Evil. Don't want to know. Should really know the song that I'm doing this week, or the name of it. They start playing Don't Want to Know, and that is on the Solitaire album. I did know the song. I didn't know it to play. I'd never played it before, but I knew it well enough to jump in and play along on the Rhodes and just play some improvised licks on the Rhodes piano. And it was just awesome. It was an awesome moment. I remember mid-song looking, because there were lights hitting us. It was like a kind of old school auditorium. So you're kind of, people are the crowd are sort of higher up in seats, looking down onto the stage. And I remember looking out towards the crowd. It was just all kind of, the lights hitting you in the eyes. I couldn't really see anybody. And I'm just hearing the reverb coming off the singer's voice, and I'm this Rhodes piano. And I remember just in that moment, mid-song, thinking, I need to start gigging again. This is what I was born to do. This is so cool. I just love this. That heat you get off the lights when you're on stage and stuff, it was just amazing. So yeah, in the following few months, some pieces of the puzzle started to come into play that would sort of facilitate me getting back into music again after a little break. And that's for another episode, I'm sure. But that's what the song means to me. That's why it's special to me. It always reminds me of that night, or it was a kind of Sunday afternoon gig, and it always takes me back to that time in my life. And I got really into John Martyn songs after that as well, listening to lots more albums of his after playing with his incredible band, which I was very fortunate to get a chance to do. A little bit about the artist, about John. John Martyn was born in Surrey in England to an English mother and a Scottish father who were both opera singers. And they divorced when he was 5, and he spent his childhood moving between Scotland and England, back and forward. Most of this time was spent in the care of his father and grandmother in Shawlands, Glasgow, which is actually where my mum and my grandparents lived, and where I lived for the first 5 years of my time on planet Earth too. So I know Shawlands well. It's not far from where I stay now. And he apparently adapted his accent depending on context or company, so changing between a broader, refined Glaswegian accent and then a southern English accent, which he did throughout his life. Even in his singing, you can kind of hear like this hybrid accent comes through when he's singing his songs. His musical career began when he was 17. He played the blues, he played folk music, and it sort of resulted in a distinctive style which made him a key figure in the British folk scene during the mid-60s. I might be wrong, and I should probably have verified this before I say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think he was the first artist ever to use a looper pedal as a real sort of art form. He would use it to sort of create a whole backing band for himself live on the spot with this looper pedal. People will have seen Ed Sheeran do this famously over the last few years. And there was also a song that came out, a great song actually, Black Horse and the Cherry Tree by Katie Tunstall, another Scottish singer. I don't remember what year that would have been, early 2000s, I think. But John Martyn's the first person that I'm aware of ever doing that, using a looper pedal. I think a lot of guitarists use loopers for various things, but not in the way that John Martyn did, where he would create an entire song live, an instrument the whole song with the looper pedal himself, just in real time. Unbelievable. Really talented, a fantastic songwriter, and sadly a man with many demons as well. He was a real kind of, just a bit of a soul, as they say in Glasgow, a bit of a poor soul. A guy who really struggled, I think, with his mental health. He was an alcoholic, a drug user, a drug abuser. And sadly, my last memory of him was actually seeing him in Glasgow one afternoon. I was out shopping in Glasgow just before he died. And he'd had to have his leg amputated by this point because of the alcohol. And I remember seeing this man being pushed in a wheelchair and thinking, oh my God, that's John Martyn. That looks like John Martyn. Surely that can't be John Martyn. And it was John Martyn. And he was outside Superdrug the Chemist in Argyle Street. And the saddest thing was that nobody even recognised him. He was just being pushed in a wheelchair. A guy who'd been one of the biggest singer-songwriters of his day, who toured and wrote songs with Phil Collins, Eric Clapton. I mean, Phil Collins played drums on quite a few of his songs at one part of his career as well. Just an incredible talent, an incredibly famous singer-songwriter, and somebody who'd always, I'd always respected and loved his songs. And I saw him being pushed in a wheelchair through his home city, and nobody even knew who he was. It was really tragic, really, really sad. Just shows you how destructive alcoholism and drug abuse can be, So as a vocalist, as a singer, I always talk a little bit about the singer's technique. So he had an incredibly distinctive voice, a really distinctive voice. He would put on these really strange accents as well that I mentioned before, but also almost sort of scat sing in the middle of some of his songs, especially live, and depending on the song in question. He could switch from a very Celtic sounding folk voice to a sort of really soulful voice that would make you think you were listening to like a black New Orleans singer. He could mix, he could move between chest and head voice with ease. He had so much emotional connection to the lyrics. You listen to his songs, just you can break down just listening to him, because you just know that he meant every single word, which is just an amazing thing to hear when you listen to a singer-songwriter. I think it has to feel real, and certainly with John Martyn it did. He could put distortion into his tone. He could do it all. He's actually a very, very underrated singer. I mean, he's never really spoken about as one of the great singers, and maybe not a really big, powerful voice that I think some people look for as an obvious way of thinking somebody's a great singer, but an incredibly gifted singer, and I think most importantly, that ability to convey the emotion in a lyric, as I said before, just that's what it's all about, And probably the most impressive thing about John Martyn, I don't mean to make a joke of it, but was just his ability to sing perfectly in tune whilst being completely inebriated. Like he could be drunk as a skunk or full of drugs on stage, and he could still sing perfectly. I mean, I can barely hold a tune after a few beers, so I'm not sure how somebody goes about managing that. It's an impressive feat, albeit a very tragic one, and a very tragic end. I think he died when he was about 60 years old. Quite a lonely, sad character because of all the alcoholism and everything that had gone on in his life. So quite a sad wee end to my story, but there you go. That's what the song reminds me of. That's what makes it special to me. Don't Want to Know by John Martyn, a phenomenal track. Please go and listen to the original, but only after you've listened to my part 2, which will pop up here in a second. As always, thanks so much for listening. Please leave some comments, hit subscribe, get in touch if you're looking for vocal coaching or any session vocals or anything like that, and I'll see you again next week. Thank you so much.